Hey guys, wasn't my fault, man. I don't know what the hell happened. It just cut out all on its own. As you could see, I was just talking away and it just cut out. Sorry about that, man. I mean, I wish I could do something about it, but it just happened. Yeah, I don't know if they're playing games, man. I mean, it's just one of those wild things, you know? So, yeah, yeah, I'm back. And look, people are going to drift back in. So I'm just going to keep on talking. As I was talking about the Azov Battalion people, basically, the Azov Battalion, there are still pockets of resistance in the town, yeah, of Mariupol. And they're going to fight to the death. And because they know that if they surrender, they're dead men. That something horrible is going to happen. So better to go down fighting. Okay, and so that's what they're doing now. Insofar as sorry, I got a little bit thrown there, and so yeah, I think that the interesting part is how the Russians are going to handle Western Ukraine, because it's not clear at this time what they're going to do about Western Ukraine. Okay, now it seems as if the Belarusians are putting together an army in southwest Belarus that would slice through Western Ukraine like a guillotine. And that's something pretty damn interesting. And people are drifting back in. Yeah. Sorry, man. I mean, not my fault. You know, it just winked out. You know, I'm sorry. I'm sorry about this. And yeah. So anyway, the point is, we don't know what's going to happen with Western Ukraine. Mm. But we'll find out soon enough. But the point that has to be emphasized is that the battle is happening in Eastern Europe. It's around Kramatorsk. Mhm. That's where the shit is really getting heavy. Okay. And nobody knows with absolute certainty what's going on there. Okay. The only ones who know are the two armies that are facing each other off. And you got to keep in mind something that's really important. The Russian army does not allow its soldiers to carry cameras and take selfies and film and crap like that. Okay, they are very strict about that, and with good reason, by the way. And so, because of it, you're not seeing any footage from the Russians. Okay, the only footage you're seeing is coming from the Ukrainians, or not even the Ukrainians. A lot of it is like PR of the Ukrainians. Okay, so you got to understand that where the real battle is in the east. And the people who think that Kiev is the big prize, they don't know what they're talking about. That's not the big prize, because the Russians, they mean to what? Protect the Donbass, demilitarize Ukraine. That is, neutralize the army. That's what, and neutralize by any means possible. And the third the third task that they have is to denazify. Okay. Now they're carrying out the denazification with the destruction of the Azov battalion people. Okay. Now they are moving forward with the demilitarization, because let's face facts, they're annihilating the Ukrainian armed forces. This is not to deny their heroism and their bravery, their balls. No question about that. But the Russians are more and they're better equipped. And so that's that. And the third is to protect the Donbass. And the Russians are achieving their objectives. Okay, the fact that they don't achieve them the way the West would achieve them is what makes the West think that the Russians are losing. But if you are adamant about protecting civilian life and for civilian infrastructure, and you want to make sure that you achieve the political goals, the long-term political goals that will satisfy you, then the way the Russians are conducting this war is exactly the way you should carry it out. And like I've said in other opportunities, and I will do a full video on this, the American mode of war is really disgusting. It's really sick, of just bombing everything to oblivion. That's just wrong. As far as I'm concerned, it's just really, really wrong. So anyway, let's go to the freaky signs that I wanted to bring up. That has, it's a pity that I had like, wow, I had like 8,600 people and now it's 1,500, 1,600. Wow, it doesn't matter. I mean, how can I put it? See, I know each of you is an individual listening to me, but from my point of view, I'm just talking to a phone and I'm getting no feedback other than the chat, right? And so it's really freaky, and I could be talking to one person or 10,000 people. And for me, it's exactly the same, I mean, I thank you very much for listening in. It's very humbling to think that you consider my opinion and my thoughts and my observations about different things valuable enough that you'd like to, spend your time listening to me. But at the same time, it's bizarre, isn't it? It is. I think so. Anyway, the freaky stuff that's been happening. See, in abductive logic, as I mentioned, you see a bunch of data points, and from those data points, you extrapolate a reasonable guess, an educated guess about what's going on. I've been seeing some data points that I find very, very weird. Mhm. These very weird data points, they add up to me to the potentiality of a false flag, okay? And it's going to take some time for me to go through all of the reasoning behind it. I mentioned before that I want you to check out on my Telegram channel the penultimate post where I have some screenshots and some links. Because I've come to the conclusion that the Americans planned to use either a chemical attack in and around Kiev or perhaps a small tactical nuclear device in Poland as a false flag to start a war between NATO, the US, and Russia. Mm. I think that this would be catastrophic. I think that any war between the United States and Russia will end in the deaths of literally millions of people pointlessly for no reason whatsoever. It will be a disaster that must be avoided at all costs. And it seems to me that the people in charge in the United States are irresponsible fools who don't seem to understand the stakes at play. Because, as I've said before in my previous broadcast, they are children of privilege who have never suffered or failed, and so they do not understand what real suffering is. They do not understand the face of suffering, and so they will arrogantly be willing to inflict it on other people, and it will be a catastrophe. And only much, much later, when it's far too late, they will realize what a mistake they made. Because a total war between the United States and Russia, there is no winner. There is no winner at all. And one can argue that at this time we are in total war, only it hasn't gone military yet between the United States and Russia. The economic sanctions and the economic warfare that the United States is carrying out against Russia is a form of total warfare. It is designed, explicitly designed and stated, to destroy the Russian economy, to make the Russian people suffer. And not to mention the xenophobia and all the insanity that has been inflicted on Russian citizens, which is, it has not happened in 300 years of Western civilization. It's been quite some time since we persecuted people. Well, it hasn't happened in 300 years, except for that one little time during the Second World War, where a couple of ethnic groups were persecuted rather viciously by a certain ideological set. Now, didn't they? Yeah, they did. That was the last time that that kind of collective punishment happened. And the West today is carrying that out against Russians. It's just insane. But anyway, we want to avoid a widening of this war, correct? I mean, we all agree on that. We want to make sure that any nonsense, any stupid psyop will not come to fruition. Okay, so I'm going to lay out the evidence, the data points that I've accumulated, and I'm going to explain how I have taken these data points and extrapolated the notion that there's going to be a false flag coming to Kiev or Poland, and I'll explain why. Okay, so I have noticed that in the West, they are pushing false maps about the Russians getting encircled in the vicinity of Kiev. They've been pushing that story relentlessly, that the Ukrainians are being successfully counterattacking the Russians. And in the northwest of the city, in the northwestern suburbs, they are actually encircling the Russians, which is not true. And in fact, some of the Russians have posted video mocking the idea. They mock it and they show, with proof positive, that they are in the location that they are allegedly being encircled in, and they're perfectly fine. And they're mocking it. But of course, since the American tech companies do not allow Russian information to go to the West, people don't know about it, but it's there, it's happening, and lots of people are showing it, especially on Telegram. Telegram is proving to be the best medium for information exchange, okay? And that combined with the ability to on the spot translate the posts from one language to another, and all of a sudden all kinds of new information avenues are opening up, and people are seeing raw information, raw video from all kinds of sources. That's why Telegram is so important. So anyway, there are these in the West, they're pushing these false maps that the Russians are losing and being encircled and blah, blah, that they're losing the war. That's the narrative that's being pushed. There is a relentless gaslighting on Twitter and poll, by the way, about Ukrainian victories, or at least emphasizing Russian losses. Now, this is really important. Now, why poll and why Twitter? Well, poll is a really interesting little piece of the dark web, if you can call it that, because poll on 4chan, if you don't know, there are image boards. There's an image board called 4chan. It has sub boards, and one of them is called /poll, POL. It's politically incorrect. And what happens is that a lot of very, very intelligent people, the people who were rejected from the elites that I discussed yesterday, those really, really smart people who've just been edged out because they didn't play the game, they congregate in poll. Poll is the group of guys who figured out where Shia LaBeouf's flag was when he put it in the middle of the desert. Remember some stupid art project that actor had, Shia LaBeouf, and he put the flag in the middle of a desert, and these brainiacs figured out where it was by looking at the constellation of the stars and some other crazy ass stuff that they did, and they found it and they stole it. It was just the ultimate capture the flag, right? And so poll is extremely influential, and a lot of intelligence services go to it, and they spread misinformation and all kinds of nonsense because that's where the brainy people go, okay? And these brainy people are the bleeding edge of information, because they're the people who spot the news before anybody else, and they obsess about it weeks before anybody else. When the whole COVID thing was happening, these guys were obsessing about it back in January, okay? I mean, January of 2020, they were way early to the party, okay? And yeah, they were like really focused on it, and they're always like that. They're the bleeding edge. They're always ahead of everybody else insofar as information is concerned. And so targeting poll, because it's anonymous, you just pop in there, and it's Reddit but with brains, okay? You pop in on poll, you drop your post, and you see if it takes off or not, okay? And the ones that are more interesting, they take off, okay? It's really funny. Some commentator was talking about how, she was supposed to be like some expert on the dark web, and she said that, you'd see a post, right? And below it'd say bump, right? And somebody else would answer that post with just the word bump. And this expert said that, I swear to God, I laughed my ass off, said that the word bump referred to cocaine, and that the person was doing like a shot of cocaine at the news. And the reason it's called a bump, okay, is because it's a cyclical. And so when you want to, you don't have really anything to contribute, but you want it to remain in the eye of other readers, you just put a post underneath it, and you can't leave it empty, so you just write the word bump to just bump it up. Okay, that's the reason for it. It has nothing to do with cocaine. And this expert on like CNN or some nonsense like that was saying that. I was like, what the hell is she talking about? It was just stupid and funny. Anyway, poll is very important. Intelligence services, glow in the darks, okay, that's what they're called on poll. The glow in the darks, they're there, and they're spreading misinformation or pushing information that might not be technically misinformation, but it's a point of view that they're trying to encourage. Because they've discovered that if they push misinformation, that is information that is not factually accurate, the brainiacs on poll will just eviscerate it. So it's smarter not to push lies or things that are obviously not true. It's much better to push narratives, that is, things that are factually accurate but just slanted in a certain way. That seems to work better, that they've discovered, but sometimes not, because sometimes poll just decides, oh, this is baloney, and just goes in the exact opposite direction. So it's always like a crapshoot for these information warfare specialists, right? But poll, a lot of stuff going on there, a lot of gaslighting on poll of how the Russians are losing, and on Twitter. It's really interesting. Every time I go on Twitter, I do a search on spaces for Ukraine. And every time there are a few of these relentless Bellingcat people who are CIA affiliated, openly CIA, or very well known CIA, I don't know if openly or not, but very well known and for sure CIA, who are driving these spaces that are pushing pro-Ukraine propaganda, anti-Russian propaganda, relentlessly. And they always have like a couple of hundred listeners. And of course, whenever I pop in and I maneuver myself so that I will be called in and so I can give an opinion. And I always start off saying, I am in Ukraine. I'm in Kharkov. I can prove it. Go to my account on the masthead of my account, and you can go to the link to my YouTube channel, and there are videos there showing that I'm in Ukraine. I'm in Kharkov right now during this war. And of course, they always kick me off because I say things that they don't want to hear. On Twitter, there's all kinds of misinformation. Most of the information that is on Twitter is completely wrong. Now, I don't have well, technically, I do have access to Western TV shows like CNN and BBC and crap like that, but I don't want to watch that crap because it's just so demoralizing and stupid, right? I did like listen to one, I tried to listen to some BBC post, right? And it was like, so the guy was in Kharkov, right? The reporter, he was actually in Kharkov. But I mean, well, I'll just take his word for it. There's no reason to doubt him. And he was introed the piece, and the piece started, and it was this, incredibly saccharine, woman, with the saccharine music playing violin, and like, oh my God, like the expression and the sad, pathetic, cringy music as bombs are going off, and she's in an empty theater, and I after 5 seconds, I just turned it off because I'm like, this is too goddamn cringy, man. But that kind of relentless gaslighting whereby it is relentlessly pushed that the Russians are losing, the Ukrainians are winning, the Ukrainians are good, and innocent, harmless people who have never hurt a fly, and Zelensky is a hero for the ages, and all this kind of nonsense, right? That's that's the second data point, the maps and the Twitter and poll. Now, the third data point, Biden committed yesterday a major faux pas. He flew out to Poland and he met with soldiers of the 82nd Airborne Division. Now, if you ask me, that looks like a leader talking to the troops before he sends them into battle. And he was talking to them, and it was so sad. I mean, he was walking around with a microphone, like the professional politician that he is, trying to work up the crowd kind of thing. But he was like talking so slow, and I'm your president. Bland, But anyway, he sounded like this old, ancient man, poor thing, that he should be in a nursing home with a couple of nurses looking after him, that kind of situation. But there he was in his sports coat, and button-down Oxford shirt and his khaki slacks, I guess they were, talking to the troops, sounding like this old, ancient man. And what happens is that older people, they develop senility. They go, senile dementia. It's inevitable. We're all going to suffer it. And what happens is that a lot of times they become very indiscreet. My grandfather died of Alzheimer's, to tell you the truth. And my grandmother, she simply got senile dementia, They were old. They died in their 90s. And what was interesting was that as they got more and more senile because of Alzheimer's or just because of senile dementia, they became more and more indiscreet. And you tell them something in confidence, and 5 minutes later, they'd announce it to the whole room, and they had like no filter, okay? And I remember back during the election that Joe Biden at some campaign stop, and you guys tell me if you remember this. In some whistle stop or something, he was talking and he said, "We've built the most sophisticated election fraud campaign ever." And everybody was like, "What?" You guys remember that? I mean, tell me if you do, right? And he said that, and everybody thought, "Oh yeah, he just misspoke." But I think it was the senility. And because what happens with senile people or people who are very old and start suffering from senile dementia is that they remember a phrase somebody said and they repeat it as their own. Okay. And so I get the feeling that somebody said to Joe Biden, we've created the most, efficient and election fraud campaign in history. And they laughed, but it was true, but they laughed and he just repeated it later. And that's what I think. But anyway, that happened. Yesterday, Biden said to the soldiers, he was talking to them and he was saying how wonderful the Ukrainian people are and blah, blah, nice things about the Ukrainians, nothing wrong with that. And then he said, and you'll know how nice they are when you're there. When you're there, you're going to see some stuff. And he went on in this vein for a while. Okay, I actually saw the whole clip. And you're like, holy cow. Holy cow. He's basically telling the soldiers of the 82nd Airborne Division that they're going to be going to Iraq. I mean, to Iraq, to Ukraine. Now I'm suffering from senile dementia. But you see how that faux pas was, it's cluing you in as to what's going to happen. Mhm. Okay, so that was Biden's faux pas. And the other thing that's happened in the last 2 days is a guy called James Vasquez. Now, in that post on my Telegram channel, which unfortunately I can't send you here because of the limitations that I'm only operating with a phone, you're just going to have to go to my Telegram channel. The before last post, the link to the Telegram channel is in the description. Go there, go see that post, and then you'll see the post to the Twitter account of one James Vasquez. It's I think it's JM. I forget the name of it. Doesn't matter. It's right there. You can find it. It's not a problem. But the point is, see, this James Vasquez, the guy glows, okay? And I have experience with glowies, okay? The term glow in the dark, you're going to have to look it up. I'm not going to say it on a stream, but a glowy is basically a CIA plant. He is somebody he is an inorganic. Well, inorganic is something else that I define, but let me go a step at a time. Back in December of last year, I had to fly out to Kiev on some business. And I stayed at formerly my favorite hotel, the Premier Palace Hotel that kicked me out during this war. And I went to the Premier Palace and I stayed there for a few nights. And I decided, I'm going to do a meetup here in Kiev. Why not? And so I announced it on my different platforms. And about a dozen guys showed up at this sports bar in the Premier Palace Hotel. Lovely place there. We had like a couple of beers on that. We chatted for a while. It was lovely. And this guy showed up, a guy called Ryan Perkins. Now, that's what he claimed his name was. And in that Telegram post, there's a link to a YouTube video that this guy made. Okay? Now, and you'll be able to see what it looks like. Now, when he walked in, he was a big guy. Clearly a guy who worked out like a lot. Okay, like not just like a big guy, like just naturally big. No, like a guy who's fairly big, but also worked out a lot. You could tell. You can always tell when somebody's like into working out, into like lifting weights and all that. He was into that in a big way. The other thing you notice right off the bat is that he was gay, or at least he had a very severe gay lisp. So severe that you're like, this guy can't be straight. I mean, no way, right? And there's nothing wrong with that as far as I'm concerned. I could care less. I mean, see, the thing that I've always noticed is that, the people who are insecure about homosexuals are those people who secretly fear that they themselves might be homosexual or know that they're homosexual and that for reasons of their own, personal reasons, reasons of family, they can't reveal their sexuality. Those are the guys who freak out the most about gay people. But somebody who's confident in their sexuality, like myself, no problem. He's a gay guy. What's he going to do? Grab my ass? I'd feel flattered, but I don't want to fuck him, right? I mean, come on. It means nothing to me. So the fact that he was gay was a non-issue. And I'm saying this for a reason. Because right off the bat, I thought that there was something weird about him. There's just something it just felt weird. And I've thought a great deal about it in the last 3 months. Okay, I met him the one time, and the one time was pretty epic because you guys know that I don't really have a problem speaking my mind to somebody right to their face, right? And so we were all talking. We were sitting around this table. It was a big square table, one of those tables, and had like a U-shaped sofa, right? And then there was a space for maybe 3 or 4 tables on the open end. You see what I'm saying? And I was sitting on the sofa on like one side of the sofa, and this Ryan Perkins was sitting across from me. And there were like a lot of other guys here, and we're all chatting and this and that. And I'm listening to him, and um, there was something about him that just didn't fit. And he said that he'd seen some of my videos and he found them really compelling and stuff like that, and about, getting girls and stuff like that. But, my videos aren't about getting girls. It's more about like life stuff. I'm not a dating coach, even though it was, I used to be called Coach Red Pill. But it's not that. I'm not about like teaching you how to get girls, and do this and do that so you can get laid. It's more like, general observations and views of the world and how to interact in it and how to have a successful life for a young guy, right? I mean, it comes from the fact of why I started making the videos. I started making the videos because I have a young son, and he's very small. He's 6 years old now, 7 years old actually. And I thought to myself, when he's in his 30s, I'll likely be senile or dead. And so it'd be smart to make some videos that will be useful to him when he's a young man and I'm not around. And that's why I made them. That was the motivation of them. Okay. And so you can understand what kind of material that would be. Mhm. And he was telling me stuff about my material and praising it, saying nice things about it. But it was clear to me that he hadn't really watched them. He wasn't really a fan. What the hell was he doing here? Okay. He had tagged along with some other guy who was a fan, but he himself wasn't a fan. And I'm like, this is weird, man. Okay, fine. And so we started talking and this and that. And at one point, I asked him why he had come to Ukraine. And he said, oh, well, in the United States, I left a while ago. I left in 2013, quite a while, I thought. And that's what he said, though. And I'll explain in just a minute because he could have been lying. And he was saying that, oh, yeah, I left because it was just becoming really uncomfortable for a guy like me. And when he said that, I mentally thought, a guy like you mean like a gay guy like you? I mean, I thought, I didn't say, okay? And what I did say, though, was, what do you mean, a guy like you? And he said, a white guy like me. And I'm like, what the fuck is this guy talking about? Huh? It just didn't square. It didn't square at all. Mhm. And then, I was like, sort of like taken aback. And then I got a phone call, text and phone, and I had to deal with something. It was no big deal. I forget who it was actually, but because of that, I excused myself and I took the call and I walked away. But as I'm taking the call and walking away, I hear the guy start going down the list of all the people there and say, "So what do you do? And what's your name? And why are you here?" And like, taking mental notes of the names and the occupations of all the people there. And I thought to myself, this guy is not who he claims to be. You know, this guy, he's got an agenda. And after the call, I sat back down and I just started staring at him. And I knew without a shadow of a doubt that that guy was. I think that he was an intelligence officer of some sort, a low level, attached to the embassy, and that he was there because it was a quick way to find out all the American expats who are in Kiev who might be a problem, because this is at the time where incels are now considered the biggest domestic security threat that America has. The fact that some guys can't get laid is a national security threat. So that's why he was there. Mhm. And he was intelligence. I don't know what branch, CIA, DIA, NSA, who knows, but he was, no question. And the way he carried himself, he was clearly ex-military. Mhm. And finally, I couldn't take it anymore. And I just said, who are you? No, really, because you're not who you claim to be. I said it. And there were people there who can, verify that that's what I said. I was just like, you're not who you claim to be. You're somebody else. What's your agenda? Why are you here? You know? And the guy realized that I was just not putting up with this bullshit. I said, what's your real name? Because Ryan Perkins, that sounds like a made up name, Uh, one of the great difficulties I had as a writer, believe it or not, was coming up with names for my characters. It was an insanely difficult problem for me, right? For some reason, I just could never come up with, good fictitious names because they always sounded fake to me, okay? And this name sounded fake. Ryan Perkins, it's fucking fake as a $3 bill. And I just pushed him, and he broke. But it's not that he broke. It wasn't that. See, when you are accused of not being who you claim to be, if you are that person, you react a certain way. When you aren't that person, when you have been found out, you act a different way. He started sweating. I could see the sheen on him. And yeah, I'd blown him. I'm sorry, that sounded really right. I'd blown his cover. I had not blown him, but I think he might have wanted me to blow him. Who knows? Well, no, I do know. I think that he did, because the guy was gay as a blade and he was pretending to be a hetero guy. That was the other thing too, of course. See, I mean, he was screamingly gay. I mean, come on. And he's pretending like, oh, yeah, the chicks here in Ukraine are blah, blah, blah. It was just so weird, because he was obviously gay. And that's why you should go and check out those videos that I mentioned, because I posted on the Telegram a video. Do not go and harass him. I am saying this very clearly. Do not harass him. Do not interact with him. Do not abuse him in any way. Just go and see the video, but do not bother him. Okay? So what happened was that I told this story. What happened was that I forgot the ending part. So he gets up and to leave, and he tries to like mollify everything. He said, look, I'm just a regular guy. He kept insisting, I'm just a regular guy. I'm nobody special. I'm just a regular guy. And I'm like, this guy, it was just so obvious to me that he wasn't who he claimed to be. And he left. And everybody was sort of like taken aback, but we continued talking for a couple of hours, I think, so I don't care. I don't care about the social niceties, I mean, I was in that breakfast room at that hotel, and you all saw that fucking video where I just raised my phone and showed you all the system pigs, all the press people there, feeding at their trough, getting ready to spout lies about Ukraine. I said it loud enough that they could all hear me, and they did. I don't care. I don't care if a room full of people hates my guts and one gay guy hates my guts. Well, he was pretty big. He could have probably snapped my neck, but it doesn't matter. I told all the story on my Telegram to my chat there, my infamous chat there, my own private 4chan, and they started digging right away. They started digging, and they came across his LinkedIn profile, and they came across his YouTube channel. And the YouTube channel, man, he had done like 70 odd videos in a 5-month period. Now I do videos, you guys, a lot of you have not seen those videos that I produce, but I produce them, and they're pretty good in terms of, production quality. And so I know how much work it is to do 70 videos. And the thing is, since I do videos and I like to experiment with the look of them, the color and the lighting and all the rest of it, I have a pretty fair sense of the technique that somebody is using when they do their videos. And just one look at these videos, and they were made by a pro. I mean, he didn't make them. They were made by a professional outfit. And there were all these like management videos that were boring as all get out. And he looked like somebody had a gun to his head to do these videos. He looked so unenthusiastic about them. And yet he pushed them out, 70 of these things. It didn't make any sense. It didn't make any sense at all, because I know YouTube. And what happens in YouTube is that somebody is going to be doing a video, and they'll do a couple of videos, 2, 3, 4 videos. And if they don't catch fire, he's just going to say, enough of this. I'm just not going to do it anymore, and just move on. Okay? But somebody who did like 70 videos, and none of them got more than like a couple of hundred views. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense at all. See? I mean, you do have sometimes some guy, and I've seen this, by the way, some guy makes like 1 video or 2 videos, and what the first or second, blows up all over the place. And, it's just huge, and everybody watches it, and he gets a bunch of subscribers. And then the guy does the next video, and nobody watches it. And he does a video after that, and nobody watches that. And it's like he was a one-hit wonder. That happens all the time too, you know? I've seen that up close, you know? It hasn't happened to me, thankfully, but yeah, you see my point. I have enough experience. But for somebody to do 70 videos and none of them get big views. I mean, the views that his videos have now are because of my Telegram channel, because my audience goes to see him to check him out. Because you check him out and you're like, oh yeah, he's exactly the way Gonzalo was describing him. Okay, you know, and he looks ex-military. The haircut, the look to him, the way he sits, his posture. He's, you know, he's gay. Nothing wrong with that, you know. But he's not heterosexual, and yet when we were in private, he was talking about like getting girls and. But it felt fake. Okay, that's the thing, you know. It's like a guy pretending to be, you know, more of a hound than he actually is. You know, it was kind of weird, you know, and deeply creepy. Okay, because there's nothing wrong with a guy who's just like he's got a healthy libido, and you know he's in Ukraine with all these gorgeous women all over the place, you know, and he's like a dog with his tongue sticking out, and you're just like, oh, this is great, man, this is paradise. That's one thing, and that's fine. But another guy who's like faking that, you're like, oof, that's weird. That's the point. And his LinkedIn profile looked all kinds of shady. Okay, and so what happened was that my chat came to the conclusion. I did a poll on it, and 2/3 thought that he was a glowy, that he was not who he claimed to be, that he was worked for somebody and was not the real deal. Okay, now why am I bringing this up? Because the point is that, see, I can sort of like spot when people are just not who they claim to be. I'm pretty good at it. Okay. The Ryan Perkins fellow, just meeting him, we talked. I mean, altogether, he was there maybe half an hour, and I just, no, I called him out on it, and and it was true, because, like I said, all these clues added up that this guy Ryan Perkins is not real. James Vasquez, who's got this Twitter account that has blown up. It's over. At last I checked, it was over 200,000 followers in 3 days. It's unbelievable growth, right? But that happens, okay? It's how it happened. Now, James Vasquez, you go there, and on that what you call it, on that Telegram post that I put, if you go to his Twitter account, there's this video of him walking around outside among the burning husks of several tanks, and he says that they're Russian tanks. Right? And he goes around and he points them out and says, look, we got 1, 2, 3, 4 Russian tanks that we destroyed today. You know, we went out in combat, and you know, we were out for 6 hours in heavy combat, and this is what we got to show for it today. You know, like he's bringing home the bacon kind of thing, right? And I looked at those videos, right, at that one video in particular, and I knew there was something wrong right away. Because, see, I've seen the remains of a battle, okay, of a recent battle, and there wasn't as much smoke. There was too much smoke. And then there was a kind of smoke. It was white smoke. And that, correct me if I'm wrong, chat, maybe I'm totally off the wall, but, you know, white smoke, you know, that's from burning trees. Because that's the other thing. There were all these branches, and thin branches, like bramble, on top of the ruined husks of these tanks. And that just seemed weird, because what I've seen is when you know, a bomb goes off or whatever, you know, the trees and stuff like that, they're just fucking vaporized. I mean, they're fucking gone, or they're blown the fuck away. They're not lying like on top of burning tanks, obscuring them. Because that's the thing. They were hulks, but you couldn't really tell what they were, okay? Or whose side they were. They were covered up deliberately with these branches, these brambles, right? And there were like fires going, but it was not black smoke. Because, see, when you have like these tanks go up or whatever, the smoke is black because it's oil that's burning. And yet there was a lot of white smoke, and in certain cases like brown smoke, like diesel gasoline being burned. But it wasn't diesel gasoline in the tank, because that would have exploded, right? And so it was just like, it's just fucking weird. It didn't look right. Okay. And what happened was that, oh yeah, what happened is that when you look at the video and you stop it, okay, see, a lot of the tanks you're going to see, they have like these grills on the outside of the tank. And when I first started seeing that, when the war began, I saw that the Russians had that. They had like a hat over the turret, of like it was like this metal grill over their turret. And I'm like, what the hell is that, right? And I found out this is very interesting. See, like an anti-tank missile will come in, right? And so okay, so my head is the turret, and the and the missile will come in, right? And the missile, the tip of it will pierce the outside and go in a bit. And there's a timer inside so that as soon as it pierces and goes in, after it goes in, it explodes. Okay? And so it pierces the armor, it pierces the armor and then kaflui, right? And so they have that grill, which is just metal, but not, just, tin practically, not tin, but you know what I mean? It's not like that big of a deal. It's not real armor. But the point is for the missile to hit and trigger that so that it explodes outside the armor and doesn't pierce the armor. You see? It's really very clever. And what happens is that, see, the Ukrainian tanks and the Russian tanks have very different kinds of defensive grills. Okay? The ones on the Russian tanks are horizontal. Okay? And the ones on the Ukrainian tanks are vertical. And so when you look at the video, you see that the grill is vertical. Okay? Because you cannot see any kind of insignia whatsoever on these burning hulks. And also the camera is moving fast enough that it's kind of like impossible to tell what tank it is, what country the tank comes from. It's just clearly a burning hulk, but what is it? No information. But it showed that little grill, okay? And in the pictures there that's on my Telegram post, you can see it. And you can realize, of course, that grill means that it's a Ukrainian tank. And it's destroyed Ukrainian tanks that have been set decorated to seem like this guy, came in and blew up or helped blow up a bunch of tanks. Because this guy is like an American. I'm skipping my story here. This guy is an American, and he's clearly an American. An American who's volunteered to come to Ukraine to fight on the Ukrainian side. And he's supposed to have like this experience, and he's supposed to be a home contractor back in the States. And and from the New York area, New York, Connecticut area, okay? And he has come to Ukraine to help out. And help out in combat, of course. And the way he talks about it, that they took me in like a stray dog, and I've met some fine men and stuff like that. And he says that, no, I didn't have to do any paperwork, just came right in, which contradicts the testimony of other foreign fighters who came here, who all said that they had to sign a contract and had other paperwork that they had to fill out in Cyrillic. And the fact that it was in Cyrillic disturbed many of them because, of course, they didn't read Cyrillic. And some of them who did, or who got somebody to translate it for them, found out that one of the conditions of their contract to fight with the Ukrainian armed forces was that they had to remain up until the cessation of hostilities, whensoever that may be, potentially forever, or for a very long time. And they kind of like balked at that. And this James Vasquez, he just shows up and he just, oh yeah, sure, and they took me in, and no paperwork, nothing. They're not paying me or anything. I'm just doing it out of the goodness of my heart. And it just seems like bullshit, just complete bullshit. And when you see the video that he made, that has several million views at this point, you realize something else. His gear, it's clean. It's like shiny new. And the other thing you notice in the pictures, especially, he says that in the pictures that he's posted that he's been in combat and all that, but his knee pads, those plastic knee pads that soldiers have, the kind like painters use, or people who work on installing flooring, yeah, those knee pads, they don't have a scratch on them, and he's not dirty. The snaps, of his thing, they're clean. They're not even nicked. It's like, he put on the uniform straight from the Amazon box and then went out there into this set and got some pictures taken and some video taken. It looks fake. Oh, wow. By the way, while I've been recording this or doing this, I've been hearing like all kinds of air activity. Oh yeah, there's some aircraft flying overhead. Anyway, this James Vasquez guy, he's not real. He's not. Mm. And I called him out on it. And my chat, which I adore because they come up with all kinds of shit. They started. This guy James Vasquez, he started saying other shit. Like for instance, he said that he had captured 159 Russians. He said this on the 22nd of March. And I have the post here, and I posted it on the Telegram channel. On the 22nd of March at 5:39 p.m. Local Ukrainian time. Because, by the way, all those snapshots, I took them here in Ukraine, so it's Ukraine time, which is interesting because you'll see that some of his posts came out at like 3, 4 in the morning. Who the hell is up at 3, 4 in the morning doing Twitter shit? So anyway, he said, I captured 159 Russians today. And then somebody asked, wow, did they surrender deliberately? And James Vasquez says, can't give details just yet. And somebody says, barbarian something, says, any imagery? No answer to that. Because, of course, there's no imagery because there are no 159 Russian prisoners, right? It's bullshit. It's just a lie, okay? And then he says here, oh, look, listen to this one, a series that he posted on the 24th of March, right? And he posted, just went through 6 straight hours of combat. I have crazy video I'll post later. And that crazy video was the one of the tanks that I discussed. 2 men were shot, but will be okay. One fatality, and with a sad face. And then some guy called Tom says, what were the Russian casualties in the battle? And get this. James Vasquez says at 5:40 local Ukraine time on the 25th of March, he says, I believe about 200. The others ran away. 200 casualties and no evidence whatsoever. It's bullshit. It's complete bullshit, okay? It's complete and utter bullshit. And I'm like, dude, how could anybody in their right mind believe this nonsense, right? And then came a tweet that for me sealed the deal. That for me was just like, this guy is not who he claims to be. This guy is playing to he knows his audience, okay? Because he writes this. This was at 5:48 a.m. on the 19th of March, okay? He writes, when I need to amp myself up for battle, I just think about the most punchable face on the planet, Tucker Carlson. Dude, do you know of any, contractor, former Army combat veteran who dislikes Tucker Carlson? That's just a lie. This is a flat out lie, The most punchable face on the planet, Tucker Carlson? No. The only people who would say that are people who are trying to curry favor with liberal intelligentsia. It does not make any sense at all for a blue-collar guy who is a veteran to hate Tucker Carlson. There is a reason that Tucker Carlson gets like 5-6 million views per night, okay? I mean, it's not his haircut. It's because he's giving his audience red meat, okay? And his audience is this guy, this alleged guy, James Vasquez. And by the way, the guy does not look fucking Latino. My name is Gonzalo Lira. I look pretty Latino, don't you think? Yeah, this guy does it, okay? And I've seen a lot of white Latinos. Shit, my sister she's got blue eyes and lily white, for crying out loud. But he doesn't look like that at all. He doesn't look, Latino, because he's not. Because it's just a made up name. The guy is made up, okay? Just like the guy in January 6th, the guy who's egging on all those protesters, the agent provocateur. The guy who was like moving barricades aside and said, go in, yeah, show him, that guy. Remember that guy? I forget the name of him. Epps, I think his name was, right? Or to refer to Tucker Carlson again, there was this one time that Tucker Carlson is like in some some fishing rod store. What's it called? You know what I'm talking about. I forget the name of a tackle shop or whatever. And some guy confronted him, and he didn't look like a wasp. He looked like intelligence, like army or something, right? Okay, this guy, James Vasquez, man, when I saw this thing, I just think about the most punchable face on the planet, Tucker Carlson. That's when I knew the guy is a glowy. He glows with the neon shine of 1,000 suns, man. This guy glows in the dark. He'd glow in a black hole, for crying out loud. This guy is a glowy, no question. Okay, no question. I called him out, and what was really interesting, where did I put this message? Um, oh, and here's another one. There's a lot of misinformation about me out there. I just read I served 2 tours in Afghanistan. Laughing face. Never been there. I'm just an old vet who doesn't like Gargamels. Open parentheses, Smurf reference, close parentheses, laughing face. I'm just an old vet. I'm just a regular guy. Remember what Ryan Perkins told me? I'm just a regular guy. I'm just an old vet. I'm just nobody. See, if somebody challenges my identity and says, you're not Gonzalo Lira, I'd be like, yes, I am. And if they say, you're not an author, dude, I am an author. I've got books. You can Google them. They're there. I wrote novels in English and Spanish. I did that. And you don't believe me? Here, let me show you on my phone, and I'll tick, tick, tick. And here's the Amazon, dude. There, see me, and see that crappy author picture that's there? That's me, and that'd be that. I'm just an old vet. Or as Ryan Perkins would say, I'm just a regular guy. Glowed. And where is this thing? Oh, yeah. And what happened was that my chat, like I said, my own private 4chan. I love the guys, my T's and F's. I'm not going to say what that means because it'll get me in trouble with YouTube, but they know. They are my decadent and degenerate T's and F's, and I love them for it. My T's and F's over on my chat, some of them started looking around, sniffing around the way that they do. They quickly found a name that it's not clear how it's related to this guy, James Vasquez. And I called him out because I said, you're not real. And the guy said, okay, buddy, you got me. It's kind of like mocking me and dismissing me. And I answered, hey, buddy, ever heard of a guy called Paul Tannen? And that's when he blocked me. I have no idea who Paul Tannen is, but I suggest you look for Paul Tannen and find the connection with James Vasquez. This is my invitation to you. And of course, I insist, never abuse anybody, never harass anybody, never send anybody any nasty email or anything. Do not bother any of these people. And they haven't done anything, at least not that anybody can charge them with a crime. I'm just saying that it would be interesting to discover who Paul Tannen is. I think it would be very worthwhile to discover who Paul Tannen is. And his relationship to James Vasquez. It would be wonderful to know that information. Because that way, openness and transparency is like a disinfectant. You want to be as open and transparent as possible so that everything gets aired out. And there are no doubts and no suspicions, because I think it's a terrible thing to be suspicious of anybody. Don't you agree? And therefore, we should find out all about these odd goings on with these different people that make things very complicated, because there's something else going on too. James Vasquez doesn't seem to exist until February of this year. Even, a website where he allegedly worked, well, it said that it was founded in 2015, but the website in and of itself only started recently in the last few months, which is kind of weird. Oh, man. I mean, if I had to guess, right, I think that what happened was that these guys set up something that, superficially looked real, looked legitimate, right? And it's not real. And you start digging in and you realize it's just a fake front, okay? Now, why do they set it up? And this is what's interesting. James Vasquez and his videos, they've gotten a lot of attention very quickly. And what's interesting is that his followers, especially his early followers, were all extremely influential people. Before he blocked me, I noted, and unfortunately I didn't take a screenshot, stupidly of me, that a lot of the people that I follow on the left, the people who are influential, influencers, trendsetters, call them what you will, they followed him. They had seen his videos and were following him diligently. And he was presenting a picture of the situation in Iraq, in Iraq, I keep saying Iraq, in Ukraine, that is not accurate. Those tanks that were destroyed, they were Ukraine tanks. They weren't Russian tanks. It's obvious from the pictures, okay? And it's obvious too, if you know what to look for, that that was set up because his uniform isn't dirty. It doesn't make sense for a uniform of a combat soldier in such an environment to be pristine. It didn't make any sense for there to be so much smoke in a combat area. I've seen combat areas. I'm in fucking Kharkov, motherfucker. I've seen what a burned out car looks like, okay? After, some violent action or explosion or whatever. It doesn't burn and smolder like that. It doesn't burn, the smoke isn't brisk. That's the thing. That's another thing. Actually, now that I'm talking to you about it, I realize the smoke isn't brisk. It's sort of like low because it's dying down, okay? It was a movie set. I've been in enough movie sets to know when I'm looking at something that isn't quite real. It's a pretty good facsimile of reality, but it's not real. And I realized that the whole point of James Vasquez, it's not to fool somebody like me. It's to fool trendsetters, opinion makers, to give them a false sense of how the war is going. Because this guy keeps insisting that he's outside of Kiev and they're pushing the Russians back. They're winning the war when they are not. And it's obvious that they're not. Ask the people, the Azov battalion in Mariupol. The Russians are winning decisively. And any pullback that they do in Kiev is just a tactical retreat, just to draw forces and keep the Ukrainians busy, pinned down in Kiev, while the real action is going on around Kramatorsk and near the contact line of the Donbass. That's the real action. That's where the real battle is happening. It's happening now. And that army is being encircled. And once it's fully encircled and locked tight, then that's game over, okay? And the show going on in Kiev and in Kharkov, where I am now, they're just sideshows. They're not the real show. The real show is in the east, and there are no cameras there. But this guy, James Vasquez, is portraying something that is unreal. And you start realizing that everything is geared to show or to convince people that the war is being lost by the Russians, that it is completely being lost by the Russians, that they have so overextended themselves and the sanctions are so crippling, which they're not, by the way. And on top of that, the Russian ruble has bounced back enormously. And I'm incredibly pissed off because I'm stuck here and I'm not able to make money off that fucking thing. Because goddamn, I knew that this was going to happen, and it's fucking happening. Well, that's life. But anyway, the point. See, the Russian economy is not collapsing. The Russians are winning this war. Their armies are not collapsing. They're not running out of food. The soldiers are not suffering frostbite, which is the other stupid story I heard yesterday, which is just insane, especially today when we had spring weather. I mean, it got actually not quite hot, but kind of uncomfortable. I mean, sunny, blazing sun, actually fairly beautiful day. But the point I'm trying to make here, see, they are lying their asses off and trying to portray the Russians as losing. And Biden is saying, when you're there, the relentless gaslighting, the false maps, and the kicker of them all, that the West's red line is a chemical attack or a nuclear attack, that NATO will intervene if there's a chemical attack. See, James Vasquez, these analysts who give false maps of what's going on in Kiev, and when Kiev doesn't even matter, not on a strategic level, the relentless gaslighting, the convincing opinion makers that the Russians are losing, they're getting their asses handed to them, they're overextended, they thought it was going to be a lightning war, which they never did, by the way. They knew how tough it was going to be. But they're lying to opinion makers to convince these opinion makers, these writers, of a false reality that would make sense for the Russians to use chemical weapons. Because if you know that somebody's winning a war, you know that they have no need to use chemical weapons or nuclear weapons. But if the opponent is losing, or you believe they are losing, then it makes more sense. And that opens the possibility of a false flag attack. A false flag attack being, of course, that the Ukrainians themselves carry out a chemical attack and blame it on the Russians. And the fact of the matter is that throughout all of this information warfare that is going on Twitter, and I assume on Facebook, I'm not on Facebook, I hate that medium, but a lot of other places, you see that whenever the Ukrainians do some horrible thing, like use people as human shields, shoot up civilians, torture people, disappear people, they blame it on the Russians. They say that the Russians did it. Am I saying that the Russians are squeaky clean angels? No, I'm not. But what I am saying is that the Ukrainians have a nasty habit of violating every Geneva Convention, every law of war, and claiming that the Russians did it and that they didn't do anything, or at least that the Zelensky regime says this. And they do it consistently enough. And my experience with, I mentioned this person that I know whose family lives in Mariupol, and her telling me direct evidence from her parents of them getting shot by fucking Azov battalion assholes and prevented from leaving, from escaping, and essentially held hostage. That's true. But the Zelensky regime PR machine has been blaming that on the Russians. And so from these data points, it seems to me likely that they're going to set off a false flag attack. And I'll tell you when it's going to happen. I think it's going to be the end of next week. And the way it's going to happen the end of next week is that, see, the troops, the bulk of the Russian troops that have taken Mariupol, they're still fighting. There are still pockets of resistance, but they're fairly minor. It's more a police action than real fighting. And so the bulk of their fighters in Mariupol, they're going to take a rest over this weekend, right? And they're going to rest, get some sleep, get some hot food, the usual, right? And Monday, Tuesday, they're going to ship them out to Kramatorsk to reinforce the Russian and the separatist armies that are surrounding and in the process of encircling completely the main Ukraine battle group. And then there's going to be that battle, and it'll probably be end of next week. And it could be that it ends quicker, because if that main battle group is out of ammunition, or more importantly, out of fuel, okay, then that's it. And one of the reasons I think that they blew up that fuel depot, the Russians blew up the fuel depot yesterday in Kiev, was precisely so as to prevent any kind of resupply with fuel. And fuel is the lifeblood of any army. You can get by without food. You can even get by with not much ammo, but no fuel, and that's it. Because you are zero combat effective. You can't move. See? And I think that that army group, that main army group in the east, that nobody really knows what the hell's going on over there. For all the satellite maps and this and that, the other, nobody really knows what the hell is going on there. And nobody's going to know until it's all over. Okay? Well, the Russians, they probably have at least another 10, 20,000 combat troops ready to ship out over there to reinforce and help in the encirclement. And so my thinking is that, assuming that main Ukraine army group is still semi-functioning, with the reinforcements, it's over. And if they've really run out of gas, it's over now, okay? And so the point I'm trying to make is that, see, that army, once it falls, that's the ball game. That's it. It's over, okay? The war is won by the Russians. And so that's why I think there is going to be a false flag near the end of next week. I mean, I hope I'm wrong, but that seems to be the reasonable guess at this time. And the thing that really does it for me is Biden's faux pas. Telling his troops, when you are there, he's in fucking Poland, and he's giving a pep talk to the 82nd Airborne Division. I mean, they're only 6,000 men, okay? And they're not as tough as they claim to be, okay? It's more like paper tough. And we've seen that from a lot of the American fighters who came to Russia and then, got a little bit of a butt kicking and they ran screaming for home because they're not used to, fighting. They're used to mopping up after a prolonged air assault. And no such air assault is going to happen in Ukraine because the Russians can defeat that air assault. There's not going to be any fucking no-fly zone. Come on. What are you talking about? See? And so the point I'm trying to make is that, see, there's no real way for NATO to get into this fight. And it's very clear that the Pentagon does not want to get involved in Ukraine because they know they'll lose and they'll lose badly. They know it. Okay. And so they want to steer clear of this. But there are a lot of political forces in the United States, in the military industrial complex, in Foggy Bottom, Victoria Nuland, Anthony Blinken, Wendy Sherman, who have this ancient ancestral hatred for all things Russian, who want to commit the United States into fighting a war that the United States can't win because, as I said at the beginning, this is existential for the Russians. And all these data points, this James Vasquez actor fellow, the false maps, the relentless gaslighting, the relentless story that the Russians are losing even as they continue to gain ground. It just points to me to that one thing. They're setting the whole thing up for a false flag, and it's coming like right now. Okay. And I think it's despicable. And if you say, "Oh, the Americans don't do that," oh, come on, man, grow up. Look up the USS Maine. Look up the Gulf of Tonkin incident. Look up weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. The Americans specialize in false flags and lies to get involved in wars that they shouldn't have. Huh? I mean, the only time a false flag led them to get involved in a war that was actually successful was the USS Maine, and when they got involved in the Spanish-American War, and they wound up colonizing the Philippines. Yeah, and remember, the Philippines were an American colony. Okay, it wasn't a protectorate or any bullshit. No more lies. The empire of lies ought to die. No more lies. The Philippines was an American colony, and the Americans treated it like a colonial power would. And they stripped it of resources, exploited the people, and then dumped it when it was no longer convenient. That's what the United States did with the Philippines. And I don't even care about the Philippines. I've never been there. I don't know any Filipino. But that's the truth. I'm tired of the bullshit. And I hope you are too. And because all this shit that's going on, you can see it's coming. Okay? And the thing about the James Vasquez guy, I keep obsessing about the guy because he's just unreal. He's just unreal. And I fucking hate that. I hate when I'm dealing with somebody who's not straightforward and honest as to who he is. I hate the lies. I hate glowies. I hate them. Huh? And he's a glowy. And it's important to understand not only that he's a glowy, but what is his mission objective? What's the point? And the point of him is to give a false sense of reality so that when a false flag happens, everybody will be like, oh yeah, of course, the Russians were losing and so they dropped a nuclear bomb in Poland, or they let out, all kinds of scary chemical gases in Kiev or something like that. Oh yeah, that's why they did. That's why we have to go to war. That's why we should support American troops in the 82nd Airborne and have them deployed in Ukraine and fighting the Russians because the Russians are evil. Putin is Hitler. You see? I mean, I want to prevent that. Well, first of all, because the needless loss of life for no clear purpose whatsoever, we want to avoid that. There's nothing for the Americans to win in Ukraine, except perhaps save themselves from a political embarrassment. And as Jen Psaki always says, let me circle back to what I said at the very beginning. Hunter Biden, Metabiota, Burisma, Goldman Sachs, Rosemont Seneca Technology Partners, bioweapons labs in Ukraine, $1 million no-show jobs in Ukraine, $1 million no-show jobs in Ukraine for the son of the president, 10% for the big guy. I think that the whole point is to go to war with Ukraine or in Ukraine in order to cover up the horrible things that the Biden crime family has done, and probably a lot of other politicians. Remember, Nancy Pelosi's son, John Kerry's son, and Mitt Romney's son are also on the board of directors of various Ukrainian gas companies. I'm not kidding, man. It's a clown world out there. Yeah, that's what's going on. Nancy Pelosi's kid, John Kerry's kid, Mitt Romney's kid, and remember, Mitt Romney's a Republican, or nominally at any rate. Pelosi and what's his name, John Kerry are Democrats, or nominally, but it's all the same uniparty corruption nonsense. They are all corrupt. And here, Ukraine is where all this corruption takes place. And there's also rumors, of course, that Hunter Biden has done some pretty disgusting, degenerate stuff here in Ukraine, or somehow involved in Ukraine, and the Chinese have the video. And they basically have Hunter Biden by the short hairs, perhaps even literally, you know? Yeah, that's the story. And see the corruption of this whole process, this whole situation. See how ugly it is. Mm. And this is reality. This is the clown world that we're living in. See? And you say that Vladimir Putin is an evil guy. Well, maybe he is. Maybe he's a dictator. Maybe he's this or that. But, you know, is he really worse than these people? You got to ask yourself, and this is an honest question, is he truly worse than these people? I don't know. I don't think so. You know? At least, you know, everything that he does, it seems to be to look after his own people. But do you think that the Biden family looks after the American people? Hand to heart? Do you think that they care about the average working class American in terms of, like, you know, paying so much for gasoline and for food and all the rest of it that's coming their way? I don't think so. Anyway, I've ranted long enough. I hope that this has been enjoyable and educational and that you've learned something. Everything that I've said, of course, check on it. Don't take my word for anything, because anything I say, you know, maybe I'm lying. You know, maybe I'm just exaggerating or hyperbolic or whatever. Or maybe I'm just a fool who doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. Okay? So everything I say that you're not sure about, there is Google. God invented Google for a reason. Just go in there, type whatever you want to find out, and find out about it. Don't take my word for it. My job is not to tell you the information. My job is to tell you the information in a way that is coherent for you to understand it. Now, any bit of the information that I've given you, check it. Don't take my word for it. See? And any interpretation of the data that I have given you, feel free to disagree with it. See? Because it's much more interesting for both of us. See? Because sometimes by your disagreement, the more precise truth will be arrived at. See? Because, see, this is something key that you always have to remember. See? You can examine the truth 7 ways to Sunday, and it'll still remain the truth. See?